You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the first Doctor story, the next part of the first Doctor story, the Daleks Master Plan, specifically episodes 5, 6, and 8. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very good. And folks, be sure to follow The Secrets of Doctor Who in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or at the StarQuest YouTube channel, where you can watch us, and you should be able to hit the bell to get notifications of new episodes. Stick around to the end of the show. We've got more of your great listener feedback, and I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy, called The Catholics of Oz. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found, or at sqpn.com/Oz. So, Jimmy, can you give us a recap of this part of the Daleks Master Plan?
This week, just after the death of Brett Vian, the first Doctor and Stephen stumble into a strange room where a scientific experiment is being conducted. Sarah Kingdom, who killed Brett, also comes in after them, and when the experiment activates, all three are teleported to the jungle swamp planet Myra. Mavic Chen learns of this and informs the Daleks so they can get the terranium the Doctor is carrying. He also heads for the Dalek base, Mavic Chen heads for the Dalek base on Kimball. On the planet, the jungle planet, Stephen explains to Sarah that Mavic Chen is a traitor to Earth, and she reveals that Brett Vian was her own brother. The Daleks try to capture the Doctor and companions, but invisible predators allow them to escape. The Doctor blinds a Dalek by covering its eye stalk, and they get aboard the Dalek pursuit ship and take off. But the Daleks are in control of the ship and are bringing it to Kimball. The Doctor, en route, makes a can of fake terranium to give to the Daleks, and when they get to Kimball, the Doctor insists that they won't hand it over unless they're standing in front of the TARDIS, which is how they get the TARDIS back. They then give the Daleks the fake terranium and escape in the TARDIS. They land in 1960s London, where they have a Christmas romp for the Feast of Stephen episode that we already talked about. That was episode 7 of this series. Meanwhile, in the year 4000, the Daleks test their time destructor. But it doesn't work, and they realize that the terranium the Doctor gave them was fake. In the time vortex, the Doctor realizes another ship is trailing him, and he stops on a volcanic planet to uncover and confront whoever is trailing him. It turns out it's the Meddling Monk, who sabotages the TARDIS's lock to strand the Doctor since, the Doctor stranded him back in the year 1066. But the Doctor manages to get the door open, and they take off again. Back in the year 4000, the Daleks now send Mavic Chen and a task force of Daleks through time to hunt down the Doctor also and get the real terranium. The end.
All right. Father Cory, what'd you think of this part of the story?
There's a lot of running around time and space, but it still was moving very quick. I mean, this was still, the first four episodes the first 4 episodes of the serial we talked about moved pretty quick. This one does too. I mean, it's still moving at a pretty good pace, at least for Classic Who especially. Mm-hmm. So I enjoyed it. It was Indian. The Vizians were kind of an interesting alien because basically all they had to do was had some person on the set sit there, shake some leaves and make roaring noises, and and you've got a creature. Hey, it makes great special effects and cheap for the budget.
That's right.
No, this was pretty enjoyable. I enjoyed these, and it's of course now it's gonna be coming up to the conclusion we'll talk about next week.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Jimmy?
Yeah, I thought it was enjoyable. I didn't think that it was quite as fast-paced as the first 4 episodes, especially episode 4, where just a ton happens. Mm-hmm. If you think about it in terms of the overall structure of a story, the middle part is often where they tend to pad things, because you need the setup and you need the payoff, and those tend to be fairly fast-paced, but it's in the middle where a story tends to drag. And I didn't really felt this dragged, but I did feel it was less brisk than what we saw last time, and it'll also be less brisk than what we'll probably see next time. I thought that they kind of blew past Sarah's conversion from space security agent to companion. But she's very clearly in companion mode now. And if we were doing episode 7, in this treatment, that would be very obvious. She's clearly an established companion by episode 7. I thought they could have done a little bit more convincing and explored, and today they would do a little more convincing of her. Look, here's how we know Mavic Chin is a traitor, and she would have been more broken up about how she's killed her brother because of a traitor. She did show some emotion in that regard. She wasn't just an ice queen. She really was disturbed when she found out she'd killed her brother for nothing. But they would make a bigger deal out of that today. It's also nice to have the Meddling Monk come in. His appearances in the Daleks Master Plan are the second and only time he's appeared. He's also after his first time. And he's the first recurring antagonist in the series history. So this is the first time a previous antagonist has come back, and he's got a logical reason for coming back. The Doctor stranded him, and now he's going to strand the Doctor. But he's not purely evil. He even says, maybe I'll come back and free you someday, which shows he's not he's not completely bad. He's just getting a little bit of payback for what the Doctor did to him. And so I like seeing him, but it's kind of extraneous to the Dalek plot. So it's nice to have him here, but it is kind of taking time away from the main plot we're dealing with. Just like the Christmas episode takes time away from the main plot we're dealing with.
And by the way, if you want to hear our take on the Christmas episode, Feast of Sivan, it's episode 209 of The Secrets of Doctor Who.
290. Maybe I wrote it down wrong. 209
is what you're showing on here.
I didn't write it down, so I'm not making any mistakes.
I didn't write it down either. I looked it up.
Yeah, one of us had it right, but okay. I'll guess it was you that had it right and that I just transposed the numbers. But It was from December of 2020. Yeah, if you can imagine back that far long ago that we did that.
Yeah,
but,
that would be 209. We're not that far.
That's true. That would be 209.
From 290. Yeah.
Me and my transposing. So as far as my impression goes, I kind of agree, Jimmy, with what you were saying in that it feels like they've kind of put a lot of stuff that's not the main plot in this. Out of the 4 episodes, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2 of them are really, two major parts of at least one, one in a major part or another, are not really taking place within the major plot. You've got the Meddling Monk, you've got the Feast of Stephen, and so you really, got these 5 and 8 really where you're or whatever, but 5 and 6 where it's really the plot is sticking to the Daleks' actual master plan. But that doesn't mean I disliked it. I think it was interesting. I liked the Meddling Monk bit. There was some interesting aspects of him, interacting. It kind of gave like pre-master feel to it. There was this sense of because the Legato Master never really felt purely evil. There was a sort of I'm in it for myself, but he wasn't like the cackling, mustache twirler of later masters.
Yeah, the master is a more refined, more evil version of essentially the same character. They're all 3, counting the Doctor. He's a renegade Time Lord too. They're all 3 renegade Time Lords, but the Doctor ends up being good. He wasn't necessarily at the beginning, but he ends up being good and heroic. The Meddling Monk is a prankster, and the Master is evil, but not purely so.
Right. He goes from sort of lawful evil to eventually chaotic evil by the modern Who era. So yeah, I agree. So I like the pacing. Again, this is for early. When I compare this to another early long one, which is the War Games, that pacing felt like it dragged. Like this, that was the second Doctor story, and that really felt like it dragged it. And that was 10 episodes. This one doesn't feel like it's dragging. It just feels like a nice steady pace of things going on.
I will say it does help that we are breaking this up into 3 parts. I think if we had broken up War Games a bit better, I think that would have helped that too. But that does drag though. I mean that one does have a lot more running through corridors than this does.
Yes. So in this one, it's fun. I thought it was really funny the beginning of this one where the Doctor and Steven basically stumble into an experimentation chamber, kind of wandering around. Like, you guys in the year 4000 Earth have got to really get your scientific safety protocols down, because that was just like you wander into a random chamber that's going to transmat you across the galaxy. That was a sort of a strange thing, but they're accidentally, like you said, transported along with Sarah Kingdom, and fortunately have the Terranium go along with them. It's sort of this is the MacGuffin that has to be passed around, and so it's an interesting story twist to sort of isolate her with them far away, and that's really the way to get her to convert, to get her alone and be able to talk to her and convince her of Mavic Chen's evilness, because the rest of her cohort, the guys who are hunting the Doctor and Steven with her, are they're bad. Like, was it Carlton?
Well, Carlton is the assistant to Mavic Chen, who's really evil. But there were other space security agents, and I like how at the cliffhanger for episode 4 and the beginning of episode 5, Sarah Kingdom says, "Yeah, they all got to die. Aim for the head." Like, shoot on sight, aim for the head.
That's
no winging them, no taking out their kneecap, just done.
The character of Carlton I thought was interesting. He seems to be like, Mavic Chen seems to be like, I'm the power hungry dictator, but Carlton is the man behind the throne who's
the power
got
behind the power.
Yeah, he's like Russia, the Tsar.
Rasputin.
He's sort of his Rasputin, and he's the one who comes up with the plan to make their failure to get back the Terranium look like it's intentional. We meant to send them to Myra because it's in your neighborhood, so you can just go pick them up, right? That sort of thing. It's sort of making.
Yeah, I want to know what's in it for Carlton, because why is he so devoted to Mavic Chen and wanting to help out with this plan to conquer Earth? Now, there are a number of possible motives why someone would want to follow a leader like Mavic Chen so slavishly. I mean, it could be cult personality, could be romantic attraction, although that's not where they're going with this in the 1960s. My suspicion is he wants to knock over, because it's been so long since I've seen this, I don't remember. My suspicion is he wants Mavic Chen's position. He wants, he says, after Mavic Chen has been ranting about how he's going to achieve the highest position, and then he walks off, and Carlton says, "And I shall have the highest position after you, of course." And that's an ambiguous phrase.
Right.
It could mean highest next to you, or it could mean I'll be the highest one after you are no longer in that position.
Right.
And so I think Carlton is at least how I would write it, is Carlton is using Mavic Chen to clear a path for himself.
Right. When you're a dastardly traitor, you got to assume that the people who are going along with your plans are probably also dastardly traitors.
Well, and even if he doesn't do it to knock off Mavic Chen, he knows that being the second in command of a global emperor brings lots of wealth and power and fame and all that. So.
Galactic Emperor, even,
Intergalactic Emperor.
Yeah, he sort of wants to be his Darth Vader. So Father Cory, you mentioned another invisible predator. Didn't we? The Fourth Doctor has an invisible predator when they're on Leela's planet, right? That's another invisible predator. We get a few of those in Doctor.
Well, and that one ended up being basically a force from the computer, wasn't it?
Zoanon.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, but those were monsters from the id, like on Forbidden Planet. And this actually has a Forbidden Planet reference in it, too, visually. Because in the movie Forbidden Planet, which came out in the 1950s, they had an invisible predator on the planet Altair 4, and they would let us know it was present by having it form footprints, and we could see the footprints being formed. The way they do that is they have a kind of 2 levels of ground, and initially the footprints are shoved up high, but then from below they pull them down, and so the dirt falls in and a footprint is formed. And they do that in this, and that's a clear visual callback to Forbidden Planet. One line, though, the invisible predators here are called Visians, which is kind of interesting. Sounds kind of like invisible, although it sounds like they ought to be visible if they're Visians, but they're not. But one of the things the Doctor says at one point is they are the only beings on this planet, and Myra, and the Doctor, that's how the Doctor recognizes we're on Myra, is it's got these invisible predators. But he says they're the only beings here, and I'm going, well, then what do they predate? What are they eating? There's got to be an ecosystem. If these guys are the apex predators, there's got to be lower stuff on that food chain.
And they're not vegetarians, because why would you evolve invisibility to
run away
plants?
from vegetables? Yeah.
Yes. And what's making all that noise in the background? But yeah, that's true. There's this in the conversation about, where they confront Sarah, they've disarmed her because she's been made unconscious, and the hero in every show always gains consciousness before the non-heroes. That's just a fact. And so they disarm her, and they're trying to explain to her how Mavic Chen is a traitor, and she talks about how she's killed her brother, and she one of her lines is, "One does not question the orders of the Guardian." And I'm like, the "I'm just following orders" thing, even in 2,000 years, that's still a bad thing, but it also reminded me a little bit of Star Wars with the clones. A good soldier follows orders, that whole thing. So it's kind of a interesting. The way we keep coming back to that is this struggle, and this is only 1965, so only 20 years after World War II, the struggle of when does a soldier obey orders and when does a soldier recognize and put himself out there, I'm going to have to disobey an order and be considered a traitor, and maybe,
Well, and in fact, we see in this episode that she comes to that realization, because get the order of, these are traitors, these are, they're trying to take over the government, they're trying to or overthrow the government, they're trying to assassinate the leader, or whatever, whatever position you might want to take of that. Okay, in theory they should be arrested and tried and all that, but if that's not possible, deadly force is authorized. That's even in our laws, that if there's some reason why they can't apprehend them and bring them in for trial, for example, life of the police officer or the military member, then deadly force can be used. So that's reasonable. I think it's reasonable the way they portray it in here, that she's following what she thinks are legitimate legal orders. And of course, you don't question legitimate legal orders, you follow them. But once that question comes into your mind, and there's proof that it's not legitimate legal orders, and that the person you're promised to follow, then that the idea of okay, I can't follow these orders, and I can't do this.
Well, I lost my train of thought. Jimmy, what were you going to say?
Well, one thing you were mentioning, the following orders issues and how close this is to World War II. And, that was I was just following orders was one of the defenses at the Nuremberg trials after World War II. And it was widely mocked. But the space security agents, if you look at their uniform, they have a little bit of similarity to SS uniforms. They're not full-on Nazis. But they're not like the Khaleds in Genesis of the Daleks. They're just that's just full on Nazi iconography with the swastikas knocked off. The space security agents, though, they're wearing these dark black uniforms that are a little bit evocative of Nazi uniforms, and they are meant to be kind of sinister, except we end up meeting 2 good ones. Right, right off the bat, we've got Brett, and then when Sarah kills him, then we've got Sarah as the new companion. So they're not purely evil, but I think they are meant to evoke that aesthetic a little bit.
I remember what I was going to say too, which is that when you get an order to execute them, but don't talk to them before you kill them.
Yeah,
you should probably suspect that maybe the guy in charge has an ulterior motive for you not wanting to talk to them.
That's an enormous red flag for this is an illegal or immoral order. If it's like kill them but don't talk to them first, okay, that's
bad. Yeah, that's bad. So Mavis Chen is hedging his bets. Meanwhile, he's kind of realizing if he can't convince the Daleks that he's trustworthy, he wants to destroy the Daleks and at least have the solar system. So he's wants to have this backup plan, because the Daleks, they're like the worst partners ever, because they just want to keep killing off the allies. And if I'm like one of the remaining allies, it's got to be going through my head like, they keep killing off the allies that they've acquired. Am I next?
Yep.
They really make a point of that. This gets communicated to Mavic Chen really clearly in episode 8, because at this point they've made occasional threats and told him failure will not be tolerated and stuff. But in episode 8, and there's something in episode 6 I want to back up to talk about, but in episode 8, they've got the fake Terranium from the Doctor. They plug it into the Time Destructor, and they put what's his name, Trantis, one of the other delegates, in a chamber with the Time Destructor to test it. And it's not clear to me, does Trantis know he's about to die? Chen says that he volunteered to sacrifice his life to test the Time Destructor, but we don't see that, and that seems really counterintuitive if you're a galactic leader to volunteer to die to test a machine. That's what other people are for. And
yes,
but then when he doesn't die, the Black Dalek, who's the leader, one of the other Daleks asks the leader Dalek, what should we do with him? And he just says, exterminate him, and they kill him and right in front of Chen. And so they're clearly building up to Chen knows that the Daleks do not value the lives of their allies. And then they send him off on this mission with a bunch of other Daleks to chase down the Doctor and tell him failure will not be tolerated. And as well, we've just demonstrated what, if someone who didn't even fail them and they still killed him.
Well, and it's funny because earlier on, I think it's like the sixth episode, where he says something like, I'm indispensable to their plan. And it's like, did you not just remember a couple of days ago when your buddy from another leader got killed because he thought he was indispensable and he wasn't?
Right.
Did you not remember that? Once
you've turned over that Terranium, they don't need you anymore, Mavic Chen. I mean, come on.
They don't need to mine more of it. They've got enough.
Right. Once they have it. Right. Jumping back, when the Doctor does steal that Dalek ship on Myra, which is kind of funny that he keeps stealing they keep stealing the ships. Yeah. So they're on board, and Steven comes up with this idea of wanting to, they make the fake Terranium, but it's not glowing. And so Steven wants to use, it's kind of funny, like Steven is future to us, but not as future as Sarah Kingdom. And so he wants to use this technology that he knows.
Right, or as advanced as the Doctor. And there's even a line, this is the thing I wanted to talk about, is I like the line where Steven's like, okay, because he's like from the 24th century or something. And he says, I know the technology isn't my century, isn't as advanced as yours, Sarah, or the Doctor's, but I'm telling you this gravity thing I want to do with our gravity drive will work, and it will charge up the Terranium so it will appear to be real Terranium. And they're poo-pooing him, and he just goes ahead and does it anyway.
And he kills himself.
and he's right. It does work. It does charge up the Terranium, but he gets in a bad situation himself, and this wasn't entirely clear to me what we were meant to understand, but basically by the end of it, it's like the upper part of his body is enclosed in a force field and he can blink, but that's about it. But he can still walk around.
Yeah.
And so I thought this is just patchy writing. This needed to be done better.
And this might have been something that would have been a little bit clearer with actually getting to see it.
Yeah.
Because this is, but it was kind of weird that somehow it created a force field around him, and he could reach. The doctor couldn't reach into it, but he could reach out and take the terranium and give it to Mavic Chen, and then the Dalek blasters wouldn't work against him because of that force field, and then dissipated it. And
so the Doctor uses Stephen as a human shield since he's got a force field around him,
right?
And so he keeps Sarah and himself behind Stephen as they're doing the terranium exchange. And then when the Daleks shoot Stephen, it dissipates the force field, and he's able to fully move again.
It reminds me of that Stargate Atlantis episode where Rodney puts the force shield, the ancient force shield device on himself, and can't turn it off because it's inside the shield and he can't touching it. Yeah, that's what it made me think of. So there is this debate between the Doctor and Stephen over whether they should. You like you mentioned, experiment with dangerous stuff, and the Doctor insists that he's in charge. And it's kind of interesting to see the Doctor says, "I'm in charge. You will listen to me. This is my expedition." In fact, his exact words. And it's kind of interesting to see the Doctor taking charge like that. Like the other Doctors would never say things on. I think the third Doctor might, but I don't think Tom Baker would ever insist like this, or even in Modern Who, you wouldn't get this sort of thing.
What they tend to do in subsequent Doctor Who stories is they'll raise, at the beginning of the story, they'll raise the question of the Doctor's authority and like, who put you in charge? And then the Doctor will typically have some flip answer. But he effectively assumes control of the situation, and then after that, he's not questioned anymore. But here, it's squabbling among the TARDIS team. Which is a little bit different, and he does kind of do a respect my authority thing. Also, when Sarah is, because Mavic Chen is now here and Sarah's here, and she actually calls him a traitor to his face, which puts him on notice that she's wise to what's going on.
Right. The one thing I noticed also throughout this story so far is I'm seeing increasingly how William Hartnell is flubbing his lines.
Yes.
He misspeaks and restates. They don't do a retake of the scene. They just let him go. It's kind of interesting to see how that's going. And as we're getting nearer to the end of his time on the show, it's becoming more apparent. It's a very different production style that they had back then. Let's put it that way.
They shot so much quicker. I mean, it was within, was it like a month or two after they filmed it that it was being broadcast. So, I mean, it was very quick.
And they were filming these half-hour episodes in like 4 days or something like that. They're just like, you're running through it.
I used to watch, back when I was a kid, it was on the air, a soap opera called Dark Shadows, which was a gothic soap opera that had, werewolves and monsters in it. So I loved it as a little kid. And as an adult, I found it on Amazon and rewatched some episodes. And soap operas like early Doctor Who were serialized from episode to episode. And so they'd recap the end of the previous episode. But I noticed on Dark Shadows, they weren't using videotape. They were just restaging the scene.
Yeah.
And so you'd notice little differences between what happened at the end of an episode and what happened the next day at the beginning of the next episode.
Oh, that's funny.
And Doctor Who would do that as well. There are times where we'll watch these, cliffhangers back to back, and it's clear that they've changed just little things between the two versions. They're
not the same. Yeah. So one thing that I thought was funny was when the time destructor doesn't work because of the fake terranium. The Mavic Chen accuses them of making a mistake. Daleks do not make mistakes, and I had one of those montage moments in my head of all those times throughout Doctor Who.
Even in this story where they make mistakes.
The Dalek capacity for self-delusion is unmatched. That's what that.
Well, just the whole idea of why the second time the Doctor runs into the Daleks, do they not go, you are the Doctor, you are the enemy of the Daleks, you are going to be exterminated now?
Right, exactly. And so the Doctor, they did Sarah and Stephen escape in the TARDIS and end up in the middle of a cricket match in London in contemporary time.
That was kind of a funny little intermission.
The two announcers making banal observations about the game with the TARDIS on the field, that was pretty funny. Someone had fun writing that.
This is bad for England. It takes away time. Even if it takes them a half an hour to remove this object from the pitch, that takes away half hour to make up their 40 runs. And
this is clearly being played for laughs.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out whether, I don't know anything about cricket, so I was trying to figure out whether 40 runs was comically large or just normal. I don't know.
I think it's difficult, but it's because cricket scores much higher than like baseball.
Yeah.
It's not basketball by any stretch of imagination, but it scores higher than baseball. So it's doable in what they say like 2 hours or 2.5 hours, but would be difficult.
Yeah. The best comedy cricket thing, so the two best comedy cricket things in connection with Doctor Who, one of them's in Big Finish, where the Master is talking to one of the incarnations of the Master is talking to the Doctor and to the Fifth Doctor and refers to him as being dressed like no one in the history of cricket ever. But the best is in Black Orchid, where they show up and they've been playing cricket at this manor, and the one of the upper crusties who's there, one of the upper class British people, starts talking to the Doctor about how much like he is the Master, and the Doctor is like, what? The other Doctor, and then it's no, we're talking about a famous cricketer who was known as the Master and the Doctor, and it's like that's the best. Right. By the way, speaking of William Hartnell flubbing his lines, back then, people seemed to wear out physically quicker than they do now.
Yeah,
and for a variety of reasons, including our healthcare wasn't as good, but for lifestyle reasons too. William Hartnell had arteriosclerosis, which was part of what caused him to be forgetful and weak, and ended up contributing to him leaving the part. But they were pointing out that Peter Capaldi, when he took the part, was actually older than William Hartnell was when he took the part. But Peter Capaldi was in much better health. And I just realized, I just did the calculation, and I am older now than William Hartnell was when he left the part.
Right.
Because
he wasn't even 60.
He was 58. He was 58.
Yeah.
He was 55 when it's in 1963. He was 55.
Looking at him, that's only a couple years older than me. Like, really, he looks like a doddering old granddad. But
I don't flub my lines near as much either.
No.
I probably flub more than I should, but I've always done that. I can't blame arteriosclerosis for that.
It's a little off topic, but it's interesting. There's talk about how Gen Z looks older as a cohort than they should. The 25-year-old looks like he's in his late 30s, early 40s, and people talk about why do they look older and that sort of thing. So it's kind of interesting. Maybe there was a interlude for us Gen Xers and Boomers.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I know I look younger than I actually am. And part of it is my mother had fantastic skin, and I got her skin.
You do have fantastic skin, Jimmy.
I don't show wrinkles the way most people do with age.
If I didn't have the gray beard, I think I'd probably look younger than I.
Same here. Well, I know I do because when I didn't have the beard, people would often age me about 5-10 years younger.
I'll have to get some of that Keith Hernandez stuff in my beard.
You're still a kid. It's like not quite as much of a kid as you think.
So we have this whole Meddling Monk interlude in here, and it was it was kind of funny. I mean, the Meddling Monk is kind of an interesting, quirky character, and I kind of wish there were more of this sort of character in New Who, wasn't just the Master, because we have all of the Doctor's allies, but we only have really one recurring villain in is singular villain, not like a race like the Daleks, but we only have really the Master in New Who. But it would be fun to bring in some of these.
And the difficulty is bringing in characters who are like the Master but distinct enough from the Master. And you've got sort of two options. You've got the monk and the Rani. And the Rani is like the Master, but she's just completely amoral.
Yeah.
And I think there are copyright reasons why they're not able to use her.
That's right.
The monk, on the other hand, is kind of too similar to some of the recent versions of the Master, like the John Sims Master and Missy.
Yeah.
Both of them were actually quite playful and stuff. And they are darker than the monk. But the challenge with bringing the monk back is how are you going to why not just use the Master? Is what a lot of people would say. Can't you do the same thing with the character? How do you do what makes it worth doing this other guy?
And, I think bringing back the toy maker for the specials was a good choice for that, because that was a more playful character, very mischievous. Played him a little bit darker than he was before, but so I think that was a good choice to have a character like that was just a little bit more fun.
And he's Master-like, but not quite like the Sacha Dhawan scene-chewing Master was. I mean,
he's not as calculating like as say the Delgado Master was.
Yeah, he's more of an agent of chaos. I think like the Meddling Monk, I think of as he's just he's in it for himself. He's not looking to conquer the universe like the Master always was. But he's just like, I'm just trying to I'm a rogue, I'm a scoundrel, that sort of thing.
Where they've done really good work with the Master is Big Finish, because they've used him a considerable amount in different stories, and they've used different actors to portray him. The actors include comedians. So they had Graham Garden, who was one of the goodies, play the Meddling Monk for a good while, and he took on a kind of Doctor-like role where he would have companions who would travel with him, and he was collecting like artworks and stuff like that. And then more recently, they had Rufus Hound, another comedian who was in that episode with Peter Capaldi in the Middle Ages or post-Middle Ages with me in it with a Schilder.
Oh,
yeah.
He was the guy. He was the comedian on the scaffold that they were going to execute.
Oh, that's right. The one that was making all the one-liners about
Yeah, so that's Rufus Hound, and they've had him playing the monk recently, and they've to deal with the Master issue. They've put him in the same stories with Missy. And so Missy has this comedy thing going too, and so you've got these two comedic characters, but Missy is clearly the dominant character, and she will wrap the monk up in situations. She's clearly in control, but he itches under that control and is trying to deal with her, and she ends up winning in the end. But
that's funny.
But the Missy Monk combination is really good. They also have most recently a female, since Missy's female, they have a female incarnation of the monk now who's the nun.
Interesting. That's funny. So there is a funny interlude with the Doctor and Stephen where the Doctor says, "Oh, I know very well who's following us, Stephen," but doesn't say who. And Stephen calls him out. It says, "Look, Doctor, I think you don't really know who's following us, but you keep saying you do know, so that when it's revealed, you can say, I knew all along."
Yeah.
And then the
Rule
Doctor,
one, the Doctor lies.
Yeah. And then the Doctor just accuses Stephen of lacking patience. You just lack patience. Be patient, my dear boy. And it's like it was kind of funny for Stephen to call out the Doctor like that. That was good. I like that.
There's also a nice bit that I like that's just a throwaway line where the scientific experiment that they're performing that moves the Doctor and Stephen and Sarah to Mira is a transmat or teleportation experiment, and they've got a little kind of glass case that has white lab mice in it, and they're going to transport them to Myra to see if it works, and they survive. And I like how, when they're initially being quizzed by the security people after the experiment has gone wrong, it's like, why couldn't you pick a closer target than Myra? And they're like, well, that was the point. This is a distance test.
Yeah.
But then when we're on Myra, the Daleks are looking for the doctor because Mavic Chen's told them he's there. And so the Daleks find the glass case with the mice in it. And two of the Daleks are talking about it, and one of them says, "What is it?" And one of the other Daleks says, "An alien device. There are small white creatures inside. They may be hostile."
Hey, mice like to chew on wiring. I mean,
yes, yeah, you don't want that.
I got a kick out of it. I like the doctor when he recovers and he's trying to figure out what's going on. He said, "Well, the mice couldn't have done this."
Right.
Like, the mice transport you. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I did like when the doctor and the meddling monk are on the volcanic planet. When they first encounter each other, they have a very polite conversation about how oh, you did me in last time, but this time I'm gonna get you. Oh, you dear boy, that is so very. It's so very British. It's stereotypically
the genial laughter. At each other's misfortune, and
that was good.
Incidentally, one thing they do in episode 8. So episode 7 was Christmas Day when it aired, and a week after Christmas, that's New Year's Day.
Yep.
And so in episode 8, they when they escape from the volcano planet, once the meddling monk used a laser or something to fuse the lock on the TARDIS, and the doctor was able to reflect sunlight off his ring, and which has special properties that are special, but he won't discuss, and unfuse the lock, and they got in, and then they went through time to London in 1966, and everybody is celebrating, and they're not sure. They see it on the monitor. They're not sure what the people are celebrating, but it's New Year's Day.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's just before midnight, New Year's Eve, 1966, and I think they mean 1966. So the whole year after it aired, I think.
Yeah, the end of the year that just started.
Yeah.
At least
I thought they're bringing it up to this is right now.
Well, the commentary on when you listen to it, where it's Peter Purvis, doing the fill in. It says New Year's Eve, 1966.
Right. And the Dalek line just before that is, enemy ship located, space-time bearing, planet Earth, London, 1966. And it isn't quite midnight yet when they land, but I don't know. Maybe we're just splitting hairs on it. It could be that they just filmed this. This episode would have been, early in January. I think it came out. Episode
8 would have been New Year's Day.
Yeah.
Would it have been? On New Year's Day.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it had to have been filmed earlier anyway, a year before. But we get footage of New Year's Eve in Trafalgar Square and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure they mean it to be present day. That makes most logical sense.
That skip ahead a year thing that showrunner, New Who, 2005, current showrunner, blank on his name. Not Moffat.
No, Russell T. Davies.
Russell T.
Davies. Yeah.
That Russell T. Davies skip ahead a year thing is a little too meta or advanced for 1966 children's television.
Right.
Yeah, but then you have unit dating not that far after this. So.
True. But that was more than a year.
Yeah. So the Daleks show up, and the Daleks have their time machine, and as we all know, nothing can match Dalek technology, right? That's
of course
famous last words from the Dalek leader. And that's where we end episode 8. Father Cory, any other notes on these episodes? How about you, Jimmy?
I thought it was neat that they explained the volcano planet as it's still young and cooling down, which is a phase that new planets go through after they've formed. And Earth went through that, and it's neat that they picked up that bit of actual science and used it here.
Yep, definitely. All right, so that brings us to the end of these sets of episodes for the Dalek Master Plan. Next time, we'll be doing the final set, the final 4, 9 through 12. So stay tuned for that.
March.
For the final 4. It is, as we record, in March Madness. So we do have some listener feedback, so let me share some of that. First one comes from Rob C. on our Facebook page, who writes, any thoughts on Stephen Moffat writing for this season of Doctor Who? And as you are receiving this, which is just before the new season of the 15th Doctor, and we have found out that Stephen Moffat is writing at least one of the episodes of that season. Thoughts on this, guys? Anything?
Well, he's writing one episode of the current season, and then he also apparently is writing the Christmas special.
Good.
And I'm glad to see him back. His best episodes tended to be ones that were standalone when he wasn't the showrunner. Now, he did a lot of great stuff as showrunner, but it wasn't as great as what he did when he was just an independent writer and didn't have the burden of carrying the whole show. So I'm optimistic about this. He's had a rest from Doctor Who for quite a number of years now, and so I'm thinking he may do something really nice for us, and I'm looking forward to that.
Agreed. Absolutely. His episodes, as Jimmy said, they're some of the best of New Who.
Oh yeah.
The 10th, ones that he's produced. So,
in the 10th and 11th Doctor era.
Yeah.
So.
I think that he is, just like Robert Holmes was the best writer of Classic Who, Stephen Moffat is the best writer of New Who.
Yeah.
And both of them had, stunning successes, and both of them had ones that weren't as great. Yeah. But in terms of number of good stories, those are the two writers. And in fact, Stephen Moffat has even written more good stories than Robert Holmes did, although that's partly because Stephen Moffat was doing 1 and 2 parters, whereas Robert Holmes was doing like 4 parters. So that means he wrote less stories for a period of, on average.
Yeah.
One thing too is kind of a hope that there's going to be more of the previous New Who writers coming back, because, Chibnall made explicit that he was not going to call on previous writers. He was going to bring in new writers, and there are some good stories that came out of that, and hopefully those writers will come back. But we'll see more from the Russell T Davies and the Stephen Moffat era of writers who again told good stories that will be called on to produce more. So that's a good hope as well.
And Davies did even ask Chibnall to write, but Chibnall declined.
Probably best to take a break for him.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just like take a long rest, Chris. That's good. So thank you, Rob, for that one. Oh, and we also got a trailer, by the way, for the new season, but I'm sure everyone's seen that by now. But it was interesting to see some of that. And then we got another one that's not related to a particular episode. Steven writes in via email. It says, you guys use the word woke a lot to describe things on this podcast and Secrets of Star Trek, but it's not clear to me what that means. It seems like it could potentially cover a lot of things having to do with cultural differences based on context of its use, but I don't really come across it in my day-to-day life. Lucky for you, Stephen.
Yeah.
Could you go into more detail about that, please? You don't need to, for my sake, I know. Thanks for the shows. I'm enjoying the Key to Time series especially.
So the term woke arose a few years ago in American liberal circles, and it was used to describe being awake to various social problems. So, and most of these social problems included a lot of identity politics, whether it was racial or sexual or ethnic. It was basically a form, putting it positively, as people of this, position would want it put. It was being awake to injustices and sensitive to injustices that were perceived to have been done, both historically and today, regarding these different demographic groups. However, to many people, it was perceived as a form of hypersensitivity that was carried to ridiculous extremes. For example, one of the ideas that was associated with wokeness initially, and remember, this term came from the left, is one of the concepts associated with it was cultural appropriation. Like, you shouldn't, if you're a member of one demographic group, you shouldn't imitate or utilize things from another group. That's their stuff. And one of the criticisms of this is if you get hypersensitive in this way, it's going to cause social problems because you're instead of helping everybody get along, you're rigidly policing boundaries. And also, you're denying people the ability to compliment other groups. It's like, if and it got carried to ridiculous extremes, like what kind of hairstyle you could have or what kind of food you could eat. And it's like, dude, I've been eating enchiladas my whole life. I'm not culturally appropriating Mexican culture. Right. I just like Mexican food, and it's a compliment. Should I not go to a Mexican restaurant and give them my business? And because of the ridiculous extremes it was carried to, it quickly became a term that communicated a sort of ridiculous hypersensitivity.
Right.
Instead of just relaxing and let's all get along and share our cultures. And I believe in response to that, because of how broad-based that reaction was, the term has actually become less common on the left. They don't say people who are part of this movement don't say things like, I'm woke, the way they used to say that. Because of how ridiculous it all got. But that it's what happens, as linguists have noted, when a term becomes toxic because of its associations, you get on what's called the euphemism treadmill, where you come up with a new term that replaces the old term and eventually acquires the same connotations. So as one of the replacements for woke, people would start talking about DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yep. And that became a kind of, okay, now the left is, instead of talking about being woke, they're talking about promoting DEI. And then I just saw a tweet from Scott Adams saying, whoever coined the meme DEI stands for didn't earn it is a genius. So you can see how even with DEI, negative associations are beginning to attach to it, because the idea of just militantly policing identity boundaries instead of relaxing and celebrating each other and sharing stuff is ridiculous.
Well, and I think in the context of our shows, we use the term, I won't say we, I often use the term in the context of when there's a blatant insertion of a usually liberal or leftist message into an episode of a show, and that isn't organic or intrinsic to the story. It feels like some bureaucrat said, well, we've got to include X number of these sorts of messages in the X number of our shows. It kind of comes across as someone's agenda is being put. It's not organic. I mean, shows have messages, stories have messages, and that's fine. Yeah. But it's when it feels like it's extrinsic to the story itself and to the context itself. For me, that's when it. I would say something might be. That's sort of woke.
Yeah, a couple things. First, I like the people who take DEI and reverse the last two letters. I think that expresses it well too.
DEI.
Yeah, but with the issues of social consciousness and things like that, for myself, I can't say I don't have any impression that we're opposed to social conscious issues, that we don't see legitimate injustices and such like that they need to be called out, they need to be changed. I think the concern for myself and for many, first of all, is a lot of these things that are considered woke actually are immoral or contrary to biology, contrary to natural law, contrary to the teachings of the church. And they're things that we do legitimately call out because they are things that need to be called out. And, I've said several times, is when I have an issue with so-called wokeness is when it becomes preachy. And I'll joke, about how, I'm the preacher. That's my job. I'm the professional at this. They need to leave that to me. I know what I'm doing. They don't. And that's because and partially because it is pushing the message. It's evangelization for these views. But also it makes the show so boring. It makes the story boring. The second they start preaching something, it's like, I'm tuned out. I'm done. Mm-hmm. I've used the example of the Left Behind series of evangelical fiction books of the rapture.
Oh yeah, Christian fiction is often terrible because it preaches too much.
There's a point. There's literally a point where they have like this converted Jewish rabbi where he starts doing blogs, and it's homilies from one of the authors. I mean, literally, his sermons he just puts wholesale in the book, and it's just like at that point it goes from being an interesting, albeit theologically inaccurate, story to just boring. And that's what these stories do. When you get, was it Orphan 55 is a good example for Doctor Who.
Just about to bring that one up.
Horribly boring episode because all it is climate change preaching.
Well, and not even just that, they totally take us out of the story at the end and give us a climate change homily. Like they just preach right at us. It's not even storytelling anymore. Now we're just preaching, dogma at the screen. And that's really like, if you told an interesting story that involved climate change, I'd maybe go along for the ride. But this was just, I'm just going to stop and preach at you. And that's a problem. And that's where we get this, the issues of wokeness rising in these shows.
The only good thing about Orphan 55, and maybe this is a good note to close on, is the parody song that Sycorax Rock did to the tune of Mambo 55. Because that is his Sycorax Rock's Orphan 55 is awesome.
That is really good. I had that going in my head too as I was thinking of that. So yes, that is really good. And then our last bit of feedback. Thank you, Stephen, for asking the question. Yes. We appreciate you bringing that up. So we could talk about it. And then our last feedback.
I don't think I use the word woke very often, but
when it may be me, it could be Father Cory too, but it comes up occasionally, but
it does.
We try not to harp on it. And then finally, on our episode, on episode 364 on the Rapture, that was the Seventh Doctor Big Finish story.
Speaking of the Rapture,
Jason on YouTube writes, I think I finally figured out how old Father Cory and Jimmy Akin are.
I've just told you in today's episode.
Yeah, right. Pretty close too, yeah.
Then he says, this wasn't one of the good stories for me either, the Rapture. I've listened to rave music, and it's not as evil as the story tried to make it. So I'm not sure what when your ages came up, or mine for that matter, and that maybe it has to do with the remembering the music styles of the past.
Well, I talked about like how it's a guilty pleasure for me once in a while to listen to like 90s techno.
Oh, I see. That's right.
I listen to music hundreds of years old, so.
And then I speaking like as evil as the story tried to make it, I'm not sure they were trying to make. I mean, maybe it's a perception thing. I didn't feel like the story was trying to make rave music seem evil, but more
rave music.
This rave music. And maybe there's the culture that surrounds it, where it like the clubs and hookup culture. I think maybe that is really
there were a lot of comments more along that lines about people who spend all their nights drinking and drugging and hooking up at the raves and stuff like that. I think that was more the culture of the rave than it was the actual music.
Right. So Jason, I agree that dance music, techno music, rave music. Not evil. It's just music. Music is music. It's sometimes the things that come along with it. But thank you for that.
Someone asked me about more like heavy metal and stuff like that. The really hard metal.
Yeah.
And is it demonics? Like I can't laugh because you look at some of these groups that are death metal groups, like Iron Maiden. They're all Christians. Like they're all like cross wearing Christians.
Yeah.
Right.
I know heavy metal Christian dudes and stuff. Also, some of it's just I'm not a huge metal fan, but Ducky Ducky Morning by Baby Metal is a fun song and a fun video. And if you speak Japanese, it's even better.
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you all for your feedback. We really appreciate that. And now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Richard C., Andrew C., Santa S., Kathy S., and Mark M. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Zyman Yannick, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. What did you think of this part of the Daleks Master Plan? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can watch The Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment there. And we'll be back next time. Like I said, we'll be discussing the Daleks Master Plan, episodes 9 through 12. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Doctor Who.
Will the Daleks win? Find out next week. Thanks, Tom.
And Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest, and remember, you make your incompetence sound like an achievement.